So we're here today with Thom Richmond of Caltri Events. Tom, how are you doing?
Good morning, Gary. Good morning here in the U.S.
Yeah, you're well?
Very well. I think we're. You maybe suggested based on the appearance of the split screen, that maybe some folks would get confused.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm Gary and you're Tom, and we do look a little bit alike. We're both of a certain age. We're both sort of follically challenged. But it's a good look. And
Gary, you're what, 50?
I'm about 50. Yeah.
I'm about 50, and so I'd say 100 years of combined sexy.
Combined sexy. Oh yes. Oh yes. Okay, so yeah, getting onto the news, and obviously here we've got this Inside the News series, and we're trying to get into a couple of press stories that have come out. You recently did an event expansion, a series expansion. Obviously, 21 and 22 are going to look very big years for your brand. Maybe you could talk a bit about how the expansion came about, and also, was it impacted by the current crisis at all, in terms of, did that delay things, or in fact maybe even encourage you to bring things forward?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you waited at least 2 minutes to bring up COVID. So that's a new record. Our motto is California Triathlon, Caltri Events. Our motto is safe, affordable, and accessible. And that has been a theme that has been there for 10 years. And we wanted to, we had finished an event last November, and that was at Newport, and in Newport Beach in Orange County. And it was a record turnout last decade. It was a sold out event, and our athletes raised $250,000 for great causes like Special Olympics and Crohn's and colitis. So that was sort of the end of the season. I'm actually wearing that shirt today, and that's the last race we've done. And we thought, well, accessible, safe, affordable, and accessible doesn't just mean in the areas that we currently operate. So as a leadership group, and most of us have been together for quite a number of years, said, let's make sure over the next 2-3 years, we have an event like this in the top 20 US markets.
Wow. And so, obviously, so you're not for profit. That's great.
We are. We have two not-for-profits. One is our event side, Caltri Events, and then the other one is our team side, and that's California Triathlon. So two non-for-profits. Right.
And so with that, the event business, being a not-for-profit, does that make any difference in terms of the ability to scale up? Because clearly, as we saw in the news, you have a number of events, 20 markets you're expanding into, and perhaps more so. Are you kind of freer, given that you're a not-for-profit, or is it pretty much work the same way in terms of what you need to get done on the ground and get this expansion off the ground, if you like?
We're in a position where, because I don't think any of us in our leadership group are using this to pay our bills necessarily. We're in a position where we can, be very flexible and just invest everything that we have back into the growth. So, the business of putting on a race, and there's a lot of companies, unfortunately, in the US, whether it's a timing company or a race company or a race registration company, there's a lot of companies that infrastructure is going to be very, very different next year. It was already a kind of a tough market. And so we're going to, we fund our expansion organically. And if you think about how races work, you get the money typically up front. And so you can fund it organically.
Okay. So you've been able to do that in terms of the way that
we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in 2015, we had a race. We did that for a few years. We grew it. We had a couple more. And then we'll look to be, I think, in 17 markets next year, with 12,000 athletes. And then in 2022, we'll be in the 2020, we'll have close to 20,000 athletes.
Wow. And those, would you say those are cautious projections in terms of the number of athletes per event? You've been fairly cautious, or?
We have been. Yeah, there's no reason to overestimate it. If anything, our estimates have traditionally been lower, and so you can have that pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
but we're really not in terms of putting those markets in. A lot of our backs, the people that are putting the work in to put these races on, there's over 50 partners that you have to have for each event. It could be anything from an announcer to fencing to all the municipalities you have to work with, and police and fire, and all that coordination and safety that has to be baked into it. And so when you start looking at scaling that out for 20 markets and 50 partners, you better have a really good recipe, and you better have really good communication with all the partners, because if any one of those goes wrong, it's a bad day.
Yeah, no, definitely. You mentioned pleasant surprise. So obviously, in terms of the pleasant surprise in terms of the numbers, perhaps in terms of pleasant surprise for the athletes and the experience that they go through, maybe you could elaborate a bit on, you mentioned at the beginning, safe, affordable, and accessible. Is that right? So perhaps just expand a bit on what the athlete experience is like at one of your races.
That's the best part. As athletes ourselves, everybody involved in the leadership of our group is an athlete. We're runners, bikers, swimmers, triathletes. And so the first part is having a safe event. And we start with all of our events have a rolling swim start. We've done that for a few years. So fastest swimmers up front, and then shortest swimmer, the slower swimmers.
Shortest. You discriminate against small people, so only small people go to the back.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
And so that's the swimming, is the hardest thing for people to get around. So they, if you're an athlete, you get to pick the time that you go out, and it isn't that scrum. I absolutely think, that races are going to go towards that for lots of reasons. The second one is in terms of support in the water. We like to have at least a 25 athlete per lifeguard ratio. That's much different than the standard ratios here in North America.
What would be those ratios that you get in North America for, say, an Olympic or half or full distance?
I read something that even in the late 80s, the requirements or the guidance was 50 to 1.
50, right.
And that's been around for a long time. And it just, the more eyes you have in the water, the less, the more resources, the more sighting you have, the more spotting you have, things like that. That might not even be enough. But in terms of our guideline, it's 25 to 1. Mm-hmm. And then things like having clinics. We have multiple clinics. In a typical year, we'll have 3-4 3-hour coach clinics prior to the event, so people can become familiar with the course. People can get that guidance. They may have signed up for an Olympic, and then they come to the clinic and they decide, well, maybe next year, maybe sprint, maybe is something. I just had a note from somebody the other day that asked, our swim distances are, we have a sprint level and an Olympic level, and I won't go into the Olympic, but the sprint is a 400-yard swim always. It's typically it's, 8, 10, 12 mile bicycle, and then it's a 5K. So very doable. Mm-hmm. And in terms of, we'll get into the different type of events that we have related to that in terms of being accessible, but safety is where everything begins and ends for us.
Okay. Yeah. Which is obviously ever present and important now, given that the measures, as you say, you need to put in place in terms of social distancing are going to change the industry quite profoundly.
We have I don't know exactly what every race does, but we have one person at each of our race that's identified as kind of an ombudsman and a safety person, and they're semi-independent, and they rate us. How did we do? Did we capture water temperature? Where's the water quality report? What about the bike course in terms of where police officers or support were supposed to be? Were they? Mm-hmm. Are we doing what we say we're going to do is really important. And obviously every race we make some mistake, at least one. And I think it's just to have to say how you're always striving to a safe race.
Yeah. And can you maybe talk also to the affordable and accessible side of things? I think that's, again, very important.
All day long.
Go ahead. Well, maybe not all day, but maybe a little bit less than all day.
No, but we looked at it's no secret that triathlon has a reputation for being really expensive. And so what we do is at early bird, we have an early bird early window. We'll have a $60 sprint and a $70 Olympic.
So you said that again.
If you want to do our 6 events, like at sprint, there's the triathlon.
Yeah, sorry, Tom. Could you just say the pricing again? Just to, yeah, sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's $60 at early bird. It's $60 for a sprint distance, and then $75 for an Olympic.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Where we have a 70.3, which is infrequent, it's $100 for a 70.3 mile distance.
Right. And what would the averages that the averages in the marketplace? You've been significantly below that, yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
And so with that, we have the you can have a triathlon relay, swim, bike, swim, run, swim or run. And the way we've done it with the $60 method is that's for 3 sports. And if you want 2 sports, you pay $40. And if you want 1 sport, you pay $20. And we scale that. And then the other thing that I think our athletes have really appreciated is there were no additional insurance add-ons. So when athletes are coming to do, as an example, I like to use the example of a $60 sprint relay. It's $60 for all the athletes. There's no additional insurance add-ons, which has been very, very favorable.
Yeah. So price clearly is something that makes an event accessible. Is there anything else you do in terms of encouraging younger people, or people of color, or anything in that regard that you kind of proactively do?
We do. So our average age is 32 years old,
which is young, relatively.
Very young.
Yeah.
We get a lot of families. So a family of 4. So pricing for kids 7 to 22, they have to wait till they're 7. But for 7 to 22 is 50% off. So we have youth doing races as low as $30 a race. And so that's been super helpful. And if you have 2, traditional family of say 2 parents and 2 kids, you can have a whole family race for $180, which is in some cases the race, price entry of a typical race for one person.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, conscious of time, so kind of try and keep this to time. But in terms of the way you're now operating, have there been any challenges or ways that you're having to do things differently in terms of attracting partners or sponsors? Because obviously you're branding this the Grand Prix USA series. It's obviously something we should to clarify as well. So you're very much going nationwide. Do you feel that gives you an advantage now, or is it just such a difficult marketplace out there in terms of attracting sponsors that it's same as it was before, kind of thing?
We've been lucky. We've always focused on being a nonprofit, being very diverse, having a younger demographic. We've been very lucky to get non-endemic sponsors. So our focus has actually been where 97% of people's spend has been, and that's in the non-endemic space. And so we're not working on our 3rd, 4th, and 5th nutrition bar company. That's really not that interesting. In terms of, I have a visual for you today. In terms of difficulty, we have gone into markets, and we're California Triathlon, Cal Tri Events, and it's California may or may not play well in different markets. So I've had to answer the question, well, how do you think that'll work, example, in Texas? And, you know, we listen very well. And I said, well, have you ever been to an LA Fitness? Yes. Okay. Have you ever gone to a California Pizza Kitchen? Well, sure. Well, you'll be okay. So, but we're good in terms, I'll put this up. This is our medal next April 25th in Austin.
Yeah.
And I think people understand it's Cal Tri Events Austin. I think Texas is showing pretty well.
It tends to be, yeah, on that. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. But are you sort of seeing the market? I mean, obviously the marketplace has changed fundamentally. This year has been, you know, been tough for everybody, whichever, you know, size of business you are. For the industry going forwards, and we think about this in context of all endurance sport. So clearly your business is predominantly focused on triathlon, although obviously you have relays and single sport options. But if you think about it for the wider endurance sport industry going forwards, and this is the kind of question we've been asking most people, and it'd be great to get your views on. Do you think we're going to weather this storm, come back stronger? But bearing that in mind, given that so many events have been so badly hit, what do you think that will mean for the industry? Whether it's a great opportunity for a reset, or whether we really need to dig deep to come out of this? What's your perspective on things?
I had a call yesterday with a large race company, US-based race company, and they asked that, and my answer was a one-line answer, and that was, do the right thing for your customer. Think about how you would like to be treated, and everything else works out. So we're you know, there was a New York Times article last year, and in the US, you know, over the 5-year period, it was down by 25%. We're just not seeing that with our model when we brought it into the Mid-Atlantic, and obviously this year is a wash. But before that, our registrations were up close to 60%. So if you focus on a average household income in the U.S. of $250,000, if that's your focal, is a very limited number of people. But when the average household income in the U.S. is $65,000, you get a much larger group, a more diverse group, and a lot of those problems just solve themselves.
Yeah. So you don't limit yourself, don't limit your audience, be kind to your audience, and things will work out essentially.
Yeah, and even in the marketing, you know, one of the things I'd recommend is, you know, the promotional materials of companies, whether it's a brand or it's a race company, is this, you know, 27-year-old, you know, 3% body weight, looks like, you know, like he's going to tear somebody up. I don't know that that's going to I don't know that that says welcome to a lot of middle America. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking with you as always. Perhaps we'll have you on again when we hear a bit more about how the series expands going forwards. If you come back, you know, if that's okay. Obviously, we might have grown our hair out a bit by then. You never know.
Well, Gary, as I've asked you a couple times in the past, I expect to be racing with you in 2022 at an undisclosed location in Europe. So I hope to see you there. Get training.
The challenge is on.
Thank you so much.
Been a pleasure. Take care. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Gary.
Bye-bye.